Welcome back. This time we're talking about Agents of S.H.E.I.L.D. Season 4, Episode 4, Let Me Stand Next to Your Fire. You know, it's funny, in my review of the previous episode, I'd mentioned how the show had really surprised me by taking a storyline that I thought was on its way out and returning it to prominence, namely the Watchdogs, making it appear that that could be the primary storyline moving forward for this half season. Despite all of the build-up that we'd had with Ghost Rider, as well as these ghosts that had resulted from this lab experiment. Of course, I also said that by the end of the next episode, everything could get turned on its head once more, and I was basically proven right. Because while the Watchdogs had the most direct impact on the events of this episode, those events culminated with our various groups of characters finally coming together and not pointed at the Watchdogs, but after this ghost situation, and namely this book, The Darkhold, with the goal of finding it before the ghosts can, because apparently it has significant power. And I'll get more into that in a little bit. All in all, this was a fun episode. We had some really good action sequences, both hand-to-hand, power-to-power, as well as a decent car chase, pitting Ghost Rider's supernaturally enhanced car versus Lola. It also gave us some really good character beats, and as I mentioned, ends with our characters finally all in one place, with the same goal. Of course, that's not how things started. The previous episode ended with the brief partnership between Daisy and Ghost Rider coming apart when Daisy leaves upon the urging of Ghost Rider's younger brother. So when we first meet Daisy in this episode, she's actually near S.H.E.I.L.D. HQ, having tricked Simmons into checking out this apartment while she's hunting for a new place for her and Fitz. Instead, she finds Daisy, who is bleeding from a gunshot wound from a recent encounter with some watchdogs. And during that fight, she located a list of Inhumans directly from S.H.I.E.L.D.'s registry, proving that somehow the watchdogs have gotten access to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s secure computers. Of course, Daisy's there just to get some help and then move on like she's done with everyone else so far this season. But Simmons is having none of that and insists on tagging along, even helping Daisy gain access to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s computers as well to try to figure out where this leak is coming from. Although they don't initially discover that, they do find out that the Watchdog's next intended victim is James, the explosive Inhuman who was enthralled along with Daisy last season. There's actually a really nice moment when they finally track him down, as James talks about how he's trying to get out of the game and making up for the things that he did while that he was enthralled. Of course, this all turns out to be a ruse because James actually is working with the Watchdogs and ends up double-crossing Daisy and Simmons. Meanwhile, Coulson's trying to find out more information about these ghosts and this lab accident that apparently created them. This leads him to Ghost Rider's uncle, who had worked at the facility at the time. But unfortunately for Coulson, he's not talking. He and Mac do catch a break, however, when they see Ghost Rider showing up at the prison. This leads to the aforementioned car chase. This ends when Ghost Rider runs into a cloaked Quinjet. During the ensuing interrogation, Coulson, like pretty much everyone else before him, asks whether Ghost Rider could be an Inhuman, which of course he replies no, he made a deal with the devil. And Coulson has this great line talking about how they're now dealing with ghosts and devils, and questions whether this could all be some kind of aliens posing as such. And as I mentioned in previous episodes, the show really seems to be towing that line between technology and magic. And of course we're coming ever closer to the release of Doctor Strange, where we get true magic added to the MCU. So I am curious if there's going to be some kind of tie-in with Doctor Strange, and even if not, if they're using this as a sort of bridge to that more magical element, since it's not something that we've had previously in the MCU. But since this episode is really about bringing our various characters together for a unified goal, Coulson takes a leap of faith, releasing Ghost Rider, and they ultimately partner together to get more information out of his uncle. And it's through him that we find out that this experiment that went wrong had to do with some kind of particle accelerator, and that they had been getting all of their information on how to create such a thing from this book, which we find out later is called The Darkhold. But before they can further their investigation, they're forced to make a detour when James's registration watch goes offline. Unbeknownst to them, that's because Daisy destroyed the watch as a way to protect him from the Watchdogs, not knowing that he was actually working with them. This culminates with another team-up when Mac, Coulson, and Ghost Rider show up just in time to save Daisy and Simmons, and pits the fiery Ghost Rider versus the almost equally fiery James. And although we don't actually get to see much of the fight, what we do get to see is pretty darn fun. And perhaps the most surprising thing to come out of it is that Ghost Rider follows Coulson's directive to not kill James and takes him in alive. Meanwhile, our third primary storyline in this episode has to do with May, Dr. Radcliffe, and Fitz. May is still recovering from being infected by the ghost and then subsequently temporarily killed by Dr. Radcliffe and Fitz to save her. Unbeknownst to Fitz, Dr. Radcliffe has introduced May to Ada, the android, as a way to further test her integration into human society. Fortunately for the two of them, with a few exceptions, she's able to pull this off and fool May. And later she's able to actually fool Coulson as well. Of course, Simmons sees right through it and realizes that she's an android. This is something that I mentioned in my review for the premiere episode when we found out that Fitz was going to be keeping Ada's existence a secret from Simmons. And I was hoping that it wouldn't be used to try to create some kind of artificial tension within their relationship. Unfortunately, it wasn't, because she realizes right away, and when Fitz tells her why he had kept it a secret, namely because of her periodic lie detector test that she's forced to take by the director, she understands. Fortunately for all of them, her next test is the next day, and she's going to have to figure out a way to not reveal Ada's existence, as well as her assisting Daisy to hack into S.H.I.E.L.D's computer systems. But before I get to the final scene and how it seems to be setting the direction for at least the next few episodes, I want to talk a little bit about Simmons, because she was great in this episode. Now, she's had her moments this season, to be sure, but this was the most she's been on screen with other characters for quite a while. Because of her new position with S.H.I.E.L.D., she's been kind of relegated to the side, with a few exceptions, like last episode when she was working with Dr. Radcliffe to save May. But here, she just had some really great moments. She really took Daisy down on a couple of occasions when she tried to brush off her arguments, and she just really was very strong in those episodes, and it just shows her growth. Another thing, it's a small thing, but when she gets to the apartment at the beginning and she doesn't know that it's Daisy that had tricked her to going there, she realizes very quickly that something's off, and she pulls her gun. That's just not something that character would have done a season and a half ago. And I'll mention it again on how she dealt with the Ada reveal. She sees right through the fact that she's an android, is not upset at Fitz, and honestly sees the logic of why he had kept her in the dark. And in an episode where pretty much everyone got their moments, this was a really strong episode for Simmons. On to that final scene where we get to find out what this book is, or at least some hints at it. It's called Darkhold, and basically everyone of power throughout the MCU has at one time or another looked for it. Whether it was Hydra, Red Skull, Nick Fury, and apparently none of them did. And the concern that Coulson shows speaks to the potential power of this book. And it's that quest to find this before these ghosts do is what's driving all of our characters to work together. We have Daisy back in the fold. We have Ghost Rider now in the fold working with S.H.I.E.L.D. We have May coming back from being injured. And I mentioned early on in this season that this show basically tries to start each season with our characters broken apart. And there's a point where they all come back together. In this episode, at least at the end, not knowing where we're going next episode, feels like we have that moment. And as fun as it is to see our characters broken apart and, maybe in new combinations and everything, this is an ensemble cast that really works well when they're all together. So I'm really looking forward to having those moments moving forward. How long this hunt for the book will remain the primary focus of this half season, we're still not sure, because at this point we have jumped back and forth between it and the Watchdogs and some other things quite often, but it does feel like at this point we have our concentration on this. And unless something major happens with the Watchdogs, as Coulson said, they're going to have to put that on the back burner for now, despite Daisy's objections over the fact that they're continuing to hunt down Inhumans. So that's where this episode leaves us. We're all together and ready to set off on the mission. So what did you think of this episode? Are you happy that everyone's sort of on the same page now with a single goal in mind. As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other TV or movie reviews, and until next time, never pit two fire elementals in a fight inside a fireworks factory.